Hi guys, so I haven't had much time to produce content lately because of the research that I've been working on. And that's a shame, but I figure some content is better than no content. You guys send me a lot of questions, and so I figured it would be a good use of time to answer some of those while I make my coffee and have my coffee in the morning. If this is something that you guys like, we can up the production value. But for now, I'm just going to open up our chat on Instagram and see what you guys ask me. So the most liked question with 23 likes comes from HRH Sarah Wang, which I feel like I'm doxing someone by saying that, but they ask, can men and women truly be just friends, or more importantly, are men only friends with women they find attractive / that have potential? Well, can they ever truly be just friends? Yes. I mean, I think anyone who, I mean, that's the sort of question that actually can be answered anecdotally. I have many women in my life who I'm sincerely just friends with, and I'm sure they see me the same way, right? It's just not the way we think of each other. But there is some research that suggests something quite suspicious, which is that when you look at what people value in friends, in opposite sex friends, men tend to value traits that they also value in opposite sex romantic partners. So they tend to like having beautiful female friends. And when you look at women, right, what they like in opposite sex friends, they tend to like traits that they also like in romantic partners, like strength, right? And they wouldn't want those traits in same-sex friends. That's important, right? So men don't necessarily care whether their homeboys are beautiful, and women don't necessarily care whether their homegirls are, I don't know why I'm saying homeboy, homegirl, but in any case, they don't really care whether they're strong, whether they're physically strong and imposing. And so some people have suspected that this is a sign that opposite sex friends are often just suitors, essentially, backup mates. Because when you think about it, in nature, not having a mate is a very bad thing. And so if you can have mate insurance, right, have someone waiting in the wings that you can date after, that would be a very strategically savvy move. And when you talk to people, a lot of them do admit, like, oh, I have backup mates. So what I would say to this is that men and women can be just friends, but they often aren't, and they often function as something else, essentially, a suitor or someone waiting in the wings. I also don't think that a slightly non-platonic friendship is a bad thing, especially if you're single. I mean, if you're in a relationship, that's not a very good thing to do. But if you're single, it's actually a great way to meet people and a great way to screen people and a great way to understand if you have an actual emotional connection with someone before you start dating them, instead of just going off, initial impressions and physical attractiveness. But it's a good question, and it's one that I get quite a lot. Okay, next up, we have one from Rupesh Gupta, 63, who says, according to research, to what extent people want their partner to be similar to them, both hobbies, job, nature, like being an introvert, etc. Well, what we see in the research is that people tend to end up with someone similar to themselves. So we see relatively high correlations across basically all traits. So people tend to be similar to their partners in every way, above chance. Some of these correlations are quite large, like people tend to mate assortatively on religiosity to a relatively high degree. And some of them are more modest, like people tend to end up with someone more in their league physical attractiveness wise. They tend to correlate on that, but not completely. And what we've seen over the past century is that there's been some shifts here. This is very intuitive. This isn't something that I'd expect you guys to be surprised by, but it's still noteworthy. Over the past century in America, couples have become more similar in terms of socioeconomic status and in terms of education, and less similar in terms of race and religiosity. And this could be due to, reduced, it would just reduce differences between the sexes in heterosexual relationships. Women are obviously more educated and have more money now, and so there's kind of more opportunity to select for that by men. But then also, I think that people care less at some level than they did a century ago over whether they're dating someone who's the same race. I mean, I don't know anyone personally who cares about that. And as for religion, I know some people who care, but I know very few people who it's a deal breaker. Whereas I think both of those things a century ago, a lot of people would have had strong opinions. But it's a good question. It's a good question. Yes, I would say that generally people do tend to end up with someone similar. The whole opposites attract thing, it's less supported than birds of a feather flock together. Okay. Is being a little toxic necessary to sustain a relationship? No, not at all. Are there studies on the attractiveness of body language? Yes. So men who are more socially dominant in terms of the way that they carry themselves, in terms of the way that they interact with other people, do seem to be more attractive. So, what does social dominance look like physically? Well, there's a lot of small cues that exist there, but one of them seems to be just whether you go hands on with someone first. So, men, when they meet other men, they often, touch each other. And the one who touches first, I've heard, I mean, this isn't my area of the research, but I've heard from people who should know that that's sometimes a sign of dominance. And this should be quite intuitive. Like when I think about it, when I was an undergraduate, it would have been totally appropriate for, my professor to be like, oh, how are you doing? And put a hand on me. But it would have been really weird for me to put a hand on them. And that's because from a social perspective, they're higher rank. So we seem to have some intuitions there. And so, if you're playing a video of a man to people and he's, very confidently putting hands on everybody, it might cue them that. I'm not suggesting that you should do this strategically. I'm just saying that might be a cue to social dominance. In reality, though, if you did that in a contrived way, it might come across as a little cringe because you're just violating social norms left, right, and center. But on video, maybe it works. Okay, and I think I'll answer maybe one more. J. Lyndon Horn asks, if AI relationships become a thing, which gender is more likely to see the biggest adoption? And how could that change the mating landscape? Well, Jay, I mean, the common intuition here, the standard wisdom is that it would be men, right? Because men use pornography more than women, right? They consume digital, quote unquote, romantic and sexual content more than women. However, we have to think about what these AI relationships might look like. And if they are mostly text-based, which most of the AI we've been exposed to is, right? It's highly based on text. It's large language models. Then what we could see is essentially not a competitor for digital, not as much a competitor for, digital visual stimulation, which is probably already quite widespread. But essentially interactive erotica. So women consume erotica, written, let's call it, I mean, this might be unfair, but written pornography. Women consume this at a much higher rate than men. And so it's feasible to me that essentially you could get to a place where a woman could upload her favorite romance novel and have the opportunity to have a conversation with the male protagonist in that story, which could be quite exciting and quite addictive, and also quite competitive, frankly. I mean, if you think about it, most of the evidence points to men wanting and needing relationships more than women. And so if either gender is going to be like, well, I'd rather not date a real guy, I'd rather just, talk to this online avatar that fulfills all my desires, I think that conventional wisdom is conventional for a reason, right? It probably is going to be men who are more likely to do that. That's what most people seem to be saying. But I think there's a strong counter case to be made for women. I'm having my coffee, so I may as well see if there are any other good ones. So this person, see, this is very cheeky. There's a word limit. And what they've done here is they've screenshotted a longer message. But they say, is cheating a weak way out to break up? As you don't have to look someone in the eyes and tear their heart out. Would also explain why so many cheaters get caught. That is, they kind of want the other person to break up with them. Yeah, so I've collected data on people who have had affairs. And we do see this sometimes. So it certainly is the case that some people do this. It's not particularly common. About 4% of women in our sample who had affairs said that they did it for this reason. They wanted the relationship to end. They wanted to cause a breakup. And about 1% of men did the same. So it's not a high frequency strategy. It's not like the explanation for why people cheat. But some women in our sample, for example, said, oh, he just wouldn't leave. Like, I tried to break up with him many times and he just wouldn't leave. So I did the one thing that I knew would end the relationship. I think that strategically it kind of makes sense as a mate ejection strategy. And that's something that Dr. David Buss has talked about as well. That sometimes an affair actually isn't about the affair. It's just about forcing the relationship you're in to end. So is cheating a weak way out to break up? Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is, definitely. Some funny questions here. Please explain the sexual attraction in phases, please. What systems do you recommend? What? I can't show this full screen. It's not letting me zoom in, but you can see the excitement and desperation here. But in any case, that's probably reversed on your end. Are men more afraid of committing to relationships than women? Why? I think that oftentimes what's happening there when men are like afraid of commitment is that they actually are just, men tend to lower their standards for short-term relationships and uncommitted relationships. So they tend to be willing to date down if it's not official, if it's short-term, if it's not serious. And so a lot of times women will be like, oh, this guy's like afraid to commit to me. But in reality, he probably, and maybe this sounds harsh, but he probably would commit to you if he felt that you were someone who he wanted to commit to, if that makes sense, right? It's more just that, I don't want to be too blunt about it, but he thinks that he's dating down, whether he's accurate about that or not. And so he doesn't want to commit. He wants to have an uncommitted relationship. I think that men are actually eager to commit when they feel that things are going well. And there's some evidence for that. For example, men usually say, I love you first in research. So if a couple gets together, usually it's the man actually pushing things forward. So I wouldn't say that men are more afraid of committing to relationships than women. I would say that the phenomenon of, oh, he's scared of commitment is usually because he feels it's about the person they're with specifically, not about the man. In most cases, there are some men who are scared of commitment. Oh my God, some of these are so funny. To study human mating behavior, is it better to pursue a degree in psychology or anthropology? Well, I can't run the counterfactual, but I studied anthropology. I'm doing psychology now, but I really think anthropology is where it's at. I think it's super, super useful. I love learning about other cultures. You also get some primatology as well, and some animal stuff that's very relevant that you really don't get. Like, a lot of psychology is highly Western and also highly anthropocentric. So just talking about humans. So it's good to at least understand that humans are apes and apes are primates. Why has Gen Z women's type, feminine, Timothy Chalamet-like, changed from boomers/millennials type, more rugged and masculine looking? I'm not actually sure that this is true, right? I think that young women generally like more feminine men, and older women like, I wouldn't say more masculine, but definitely more bearded, so we know that. So younger women tend to like clean-shaven faces, older women tend to like beards. Younger women tend to like, smooth skin, nice hairline, no signs of aging. Whereas older women do like a little bit of that, the kind of silver fox thing. And so I think that when you're looking at it as someone who is in this cross section of time, you might think, oh, the millennials and boomers, they really liked the rugged guys with the beards, looking quite macho. Whereas the young women, they seem to like the pretty boys. But I'd say when those young women get older, they will also shift to that more, quote unquote, as you say, rugged look. Because when you look at who millennials and boomers were into when they were younger, millennials grew up on Justin Bieber and the Jonas Brothers, right? All right, they weren't into the most masculine men ever at that time. It was only later that it was Jason Momoa and whatnot. So and Pedro Pascal or whoever the millennials are fiending over. Did you doing boxing ever get you laid? No. It's people always assume that because I was a boxer in high school that got me tons of attention from girls, but not at all. I don't think anyone cared. I mean, maybe it's hard. It's hard to do. Again, it's hard to do the counterfactual. I'm not sure. Maybe people who were interested in me wouldn't have been interested in me if I didn't box, but I don't think it had anything to do with it. Any correlation between neck size and attractiveness? Yes. So for men, building up your neck, that's always a good move. Makes your jaw look better. You can see that some people have done some cool photoshops online. It makes a big difference. I think Koovs did a video on it, so that might be cool to look at. My boyfriend says women get the ick if you cry in front of them or show weakness. I don't think that's true. What do you think? Hasn't been true in my experience at all, but I haven't seen any research on it, and I have seen some anecdotal cases of women saying that they don't like that, but I don't know. I mean, you're a woman. Why you should have some intuitions as to whether it doesn't matter whether women in general get the ick. If you wouldn't, then you wouldn't, right? So that's fine. I wouldn't stress about it. Okay, where is a good place to meet a man and woman in a physical place? No more online dating. Men are also intimidated by me. How do I fix that? Well, on the intimidating thing, that's pretty easy to fix. So if you're a woman and you want to be approached, you can just throw out a very basic indicator that you're interested in the guy, and I'm sure that he'll come over. First, you can approach, but if you're too shy to do that, oftentimes just making heavy eye contact, smiling, trying to show, especially if you're in a place like a bar or a club, I think that if they're interested, they'll usually come up. I think that would work. Now, obviously, the traditional place to meet someone, bars, clubs, pubs, those work, but you can also try some of the newer methods of meeting people, which is basically just to get a hobby that has a mixed gender space of people in your age group. I think that run clubs, they look pretty good. From what I've seen online, it looks like it's big crowds of young people hanging out with each other. I obviously don't know your age, but you're on Instagram and messaging the hominid family, so maybe you're on the younger side. I'm not sure, but run clubs certainly for people in their 20s and 30s seem to be a great place to meet people. But you can also join any kind of social event or sport or anything like that, where you get exposure to the opposite gender and get to see them in person. I don't think there's anything wrong with the bars though. There's nothing wrong with going out with the girls and hanging out and making eye contact with some guys and batting lashes, sending out a smile and seeing if any of them bite. I think if you want to avoid dating apps, there's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of people who have happily met someone at the bar, including me. So. In any case, I guess this is done, or we're almost done, and I want to get to work, so I'm going to stop recording. And if you guys want me to do this more, I can, but it can also be a one-time thing. Cheers.